And we're on the air. How's it
Ta-da.
going today? How's it going today, Shane?
Oh, aside from the catastrophic collapse of a tower of boxes from my move at 8 in the morning.
Did you move? I don't remember hearing anything
No,
about
I haven't muttered a word.
Understandable. You were listening to Box Talk, CJL 1690 AM radio, formerly known as Cinema Smackdown.
We're here for all your moving tips as we approach the July 1st moving season.
I'm Michael Brody. I'm joined today by Shane Simmons in a nice, rare appearance on the show.
Yeah, I can barely drag my ass out here these days.
I always appreciate the rare occasion when you show up, ready to talk, boxes.
Yeah, no, I always wait for Tess to pick me up in an Uber and bring me on over, and then she leaves.
She does love her Uber. Let's talk trash about Tess. My favorite thing about her situation of always arriving late on this show, she literally lives about 80 feet from a bus stop that takes her to the front door of the building we're in. With this in mind, she still chooses a completely different schedule in order to constantly arrive here about 10 minutes after we start.
She likes a challenge.
It's an interesting challenge. I do believe she just waits till the last minute and calls an Uber and then screams at the traffic as she's trying to get here the entire way. So, I mean, maybe it's like a video game for her. She's trying to get a better score, arrive with a better time. I'm not sure.
Or a better rating as an Uber customer.
Could be. As I've said a couple of times now, I really do long for the days when she showed up here an hour early, having forgotten what time our show was on. I mean, it does beat her showing up at 3, wondering why we're just finishing.
Well, every week is a daylight savings time switch for her.
That's a pretty reasonable answer. So, it is April the 14th in the year of our Lord 2019, and that means that 2 days ago, the new Hellboy movie came out. And that's enough of a reason to take a little walk down memory lane and talk about the director who made Hellboy. This is his 10th year anniversary of not having made a movie, and his big triumphant return with Hellboy, no subtitle.
Yeah, we're not talking about Guillermo del Toro here.
No.
We are talking about Neil Marshall.
No, Guillermo del Toro's been pumping them out.
Yeah.
That guy's been keeping busy with his gothic castle romances and his fish sex movies. What's Neil Marshall been doing? Just directing a lot of TV. But let's go back to the beginning and talk about everything he did getting all the way up to Hellboy. And then at the end, we'll do a little Hellboy retrospective. We can talk a little bit about what we think of each film and discuss what we think of the new movie as compared to perhaps what all the critics think. See if it's different, the same, better, worse.
Do you want to start off? Because I was checking his filmography and I realized, he wrote a film that I didn't realize was him. Okay, so none of us have seen Killing Time from 1998.
It has a memorable poster.
It does. It's one of those video boxes I remember,
Yeah, it's a poster of a woman with 2 guns pointed down wearing a skin-tight leotard. And if you read anything about the movie, the first thing anyone says is, so that doesn't appear in the movie.
No, and apparently the whole thing takes place in one room, basically.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't read that part. That's interesting considering I know the plot is someone hires an assassin to kill people and then realizes he doesn't have the money to pay her, so he hires another assassin to kill her.
Yeah, it sounds like a string of, I guess, bargain basement assassins?
It sounds to me kind of like the whole credit card system of our lives, which is, you get a credit card, you get way into debt, and then you think, I know I can get out of this debt, I'll get another credit card, I'll put some of that debt on here, and then that just keeps going forever. You just keep...
Yeah, I had a notion I should try and catch this film before we discuss Neil Marshall, and turns out my local Blockbuster's closed.
That's funny, because when you mention that, I think that is one of those films I used to see on the shelf that I always walked past.
Yeah.
But let's bear in mind, as important early works from an artist go, he's the 3rd or 4th name on the screenwriting list. I'm not too worried about this being part of his oeuvre.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
But. Yeah. And I mean, his first feature that anybody noticed or that got released at all is Dog Soldiers from 2002. Let's do that thing where I read the 1-sentence description of this and then we can laugh about how off it is.
Okay, yeah, let's see if it matches my brief description.
A routine military exercise turns into a nightmare in the Scotland wilderness. Wow, they went deep.
Oh, okay. Because my summary is British squatties versus a family of werewolves.
Yeah, that's better. It's a little more interesting. Now, to be fair, going back as far as Dog Soldiers, Neil Marshall wrote this. He wrote it alone. It is an interesting movie, but screenplay-wise, it's a massive mess in places, which will follow him throughout his entire screenwriting career as we discuss him. Everything is messy. There is no movie I consider to be a perfect film. The closest thing is the one we'll talk about after this.
Messy but inventive.
Yes, absolutely.
And filled with great violent bits and action bits and gore bits.
Yeah.
He comes up with some compelling little gags to
also,
fill his films with.
Dog Soldiers has relatively little CGI.
Yes, they are my preferred werewolf design, which is Wile E. Coyote costumes.
Yeah, but however, I will say that there is some CGI in this, and when it shows up, it's annoyingly obvious, which I never enjoy. The only CGI I will accept is the erasing of wires. That's it. That's it for me. Anything else you do, I'm gonna get that uncanny valley feeling, and it's going to ruin something for me. Just listen, directors, here's my little tip to you. You're thinking of CGI? Just go ahead and pay a little extra money and get someone to do claymation stop motion for you, because it will take me out of the movie less.
Well, blood and gore always works better as a practical effect.
Yeah,
if only because those droplets know how to obey physics just fine. They don't need your stupid cartoon computer animation to do it for them.
Although I'm not entirely sure what they're doing these days, but when the Walking Dead TV show started, every single headshot on that show was CGI, and they're hideous. And at a certain point, either the programmers figured out how to do it, because now they look amazing, or someone in the production staff said, from now on, no more CGI.
Well, they figured out the headshots just in time for everybody in the post-apocalypse to run out of bullets and guns. So now it's all arrows to the head.
True, but everything on that show now looks... I'm not seeing digital artifacting anymore. I'm not seeing blood splatter that just looks like a cartoon overlaid on top of the image. Everything on the show looks pretty perfect these days. So, as I say...
If only the same could be said for the script.
We can't go there. Season after season, it's just layering on supervillains that don't really make any sense at this point. But whatever, we're not here to talk about The Walking Dead. We're here to talk about combat werewolf movies.
Although I will say I'm a little surprised that Neil Marshall hasn't been drafted to direct an episode or two of Walking Dead.
He has directed some really prestige TV and some absolute dreck. So this falls right in the perfect middle of that. Perhaps at one time considered prestige TV. Now The Walking Dead is kind of drecky.
But to say about Dog Soldiers, I would have to reluctantly say it's kind of my favorite werewolf movie by virtue of the fact that there are hardly any good werewolf movies. Right. So this one at least is lots of fun.
I'm hoping what you mean is it's in your top 10 as opposed to it's better than American Werewolf in London.
Okay, fair enough. American Werewolf in London does take the cake for werewolf movies.
Yeah.
But the pickings are slim.
There is a movie I will very, very carefully recommend called Big Bad Wolf from about 10 years ago, which is the trashiest exploitation werewolf movie you will ever see. It features really gratuitous violence and really gratuitous sexuality. So if you're remotely sensitive, do not touch this movie. But if you're into trash cinema, Big Bad Wolf is kind of wonderful. That was the one werewolf movie I've seen in the last 30 years that I came away with any entertainment value on past the two we're talking about.
Well, I remain very fond of Dog Soldiers and thought it was the sign of a very promising upstart writer-director career. Mm-hmm. And this was validated by his very next film, which was The Descent.
That's the big one.
That is, for me, it's not just his masterpiece, it's just a general masterpiece. I absolutely love The Descent. That was the one that really got my attention. I said, this guy is amazing.
I really do like the film. I will just give it a tiny criticism of, there's a chunk in the middle of that movie where it loses me a little bit and they focus a little too much on the monsters. and I just felt it's a touch uneven, but really it's a tiny criticism in an otherwise pretty perfect film. It's a pretty great movie.
It's sort of the same premise as City Slickers. Group of friends go on an annual adventure vacation, and things go badly.
I do love that scene in City Slickers where Billy Crystal uses a climbing. What was it?
What, a pickaxe?
A pickaxe into Bruno Kirby's leg, though. That was by far my favorite moment in City Slickers. I do wish that scene existed.
Yeah, the Descent, by contrast, is probably one of the most humorless horror films I can think of off the top of my head. It is grim from the opening scene on.
Yeah.
It establishes a really dark, horrible mood because one of the characters suffers a terrible tragedy very early on, and the next vacation they go on is about trying to get away from that and recover from that, and things just go even more spectacularly bad.
That is why they decided to go on a cattle drive. Let's just do the one line description.
Sure.
A caving expedition goes horribly wrong as the explorers become trapped and ultimately pursued by a strange breed of predators.
Yeah, see, I would not even give away that much if I had my choice, because the thing is,
I'd just go with a really good movie about people going underground.
Yeah,
leave it at that.
This group of women decide to go on a cave spelunking adventure. That was their. The first trip they did was a white water rafting trip, and then their follow-up is this spelunking expedition, and things go bad when they kind of get trapped underground, and one of them gets injured, and the situation is already super horrible and intense, and not a lot of fun, and if the whole film had just been that, it would have been quite the thriller. And then they discover troglodytes.
Yeah.
And in a moment of the reveal moment for that, I've shown this film to quite a few people, and I've seen it make grown men scream.
That is my goal when trying to show anyone a movie. Let's get that screaming moment.
It is a truly effective moment. In fact, the person I'm thinking of in particular screamed both times I showed it to him because he forgot where the reveal was. So the second time it got him again.
All right, let's take a quick break to do a few ads, and when we come back, we will discuss The Descent a little bit more, including the alternate American ending, which is in and of itself sort of an interesting piece of film history. We'll be right back. What was I going to ask a question about that? The American ending is the one that ends with her in the truck, and then she turns and sees a ghost. But what's the ghost again?
It's one of her friends.
Okay. One of the dead friends.
Although I think
I'm not going to say.
No, it's one of her friends. I think it's the one she had to kill. But as I recall, that's in the British version. What they do is they cut out the epilogue.
Yeah,
where she's back underground.
I'll touch on it without giving it away.
Yeah. So.
Don't worry. It's just to say, it ends wrong.
By the way, the screaming friend was Eric. He usually has greater fortitude than that. But
20 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Jesus.
Oh dear.
Thanks for bringing your puppet voice.
Alright, here we go. And we're back on CGLS 1690's Cinema Smackdown. We've dropped the box talk, and we're back talking movies. We're talking about Neil Marshall. I keep wanting to say Neil Jordan. Can we do a Neil Jordan episode? I'm a fan.
Or Neil Gaiman, or Neil...
Yeah, but he doesn't have a lot of movies. Neil Gaiman doesn't have a lot of movies.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more in the TV vein right now. But Neil Jordan has a couple. Neil Jordan has 30 films, of which I like 3. And of which 27 deeply offend me. But it's still interesting. I say we just switch right now.
Yeah. It's the all Neil show.
I've got a lot of crying game material inside me. That sounds dark. Anything I've ever said sounds dark. So we're talking about Neil Marshall's The Descent, which we both consider to be his masterpiece. He did write it. He did direct it solo. No additional help from anybody. No.
He did everything, including the craft services.
It's, as they like to say about Paul Thomas Anderson working on the movie Magnolia, he shot the film. He edited the film. He ground the glass they used to make the lenses for the cameras. That's my favorite. Director goes a bit too far in what departments he's taking over.
So he's a real Tommy Wiseau, is what you're saying.
I mean, that guy is untouchable in the levels of making a project completely yours from beginning to end. So let's see. The tension in The Descent is excellent. The cast is excellent. The effects are pretty great. I think there's... It's been a decade since I've seen it. Mm-hmm. Isn't there just a little bit of that J-horror, shaky monster cam stuff happening?
No.
Because that's how I remember it.
Yeah, no. It's a lot of darkness and guys in suits. Creepy, right. Fetal-like
and
troglodyte suits.
Crawling through tiny, tiny little spaces in a cave that are then confronted with monsters right in their faces. Right?
Yeah, and eventually they have to fight back, and they fight back hard.
Yeah. If you're even the slightest bit claustrophobic, I highly recommend this.
Oh, yes. Yes, you'll love it.
Very, very effective for you.
Or if you have a bit of a phobia about troglodytes.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, well, you know, if Chud really freaked you out, guess what? Here's another one.
So does that mean that this movie is a quasi-sequel to Bone Tomahawk?
Yeah, that's another good troglodyte film, certainly. That's
we quietly
as far as modern troglodyte films go, these are the two highest examples I can think of.
And The 13th Warrior.
Yeah, well, that's not a very high example, but it's
sort of a troglodyte movie, isn't it?
Yeah, ultimately, well, the thing
is,
is,
Viking thing.
The thing about The 13th Warrior is they never explain what the cave-dwelling threat is, right. Unlike the book, which tells you outright, by the way, this is the last tribe of Neanderthals.
Right.
Yeah, the movie skips the punchline to the entire story. So, congratulations, movie.
You and I have seen a couple of movies in the cinema together where 5 minutes into the movie I checked out completely and just sat there angry. And one of them was 13th Warrior.
Mm-hmm.
Another one was Gladiator with Russell Crowe. 5 minutes in, I was just mad at that movie, and it never got better for me. The beloved Oscar-winning, riddled with the worst CGI I've ever seen, Gladiator.
Are you not entertained? I guess not.
So on the nose as a comment, yet so right. What can I say about a movie whose villain is the inventor of the toilet?
That is incorrect, actually.
Well, it's where the
Commodus had nothing to do with toilets. There was another guy named
Don't
Commode.
Take away the only thing I liked about this film. Is there a scene in Gladiator where he's like, I have this new idea?
No.
Because that would be right in keeping with my feelings about the film.
I think plumbing needed an extra 1,000 years to get in the vicinity of the Commode.
It is true that Joaquin Phoenix's performance in this film does in fact stink. So there you go. That was a bad joke. So let's get back to The Descent and talk just very briefly about the magic of... Was it a Weinstein purchase? Is it one of those movies?
Oh, it might have been.
So some company bought The Descent, which had already been playing in Europe, and decided that they would put it out in North America. And their thought was, this is a great movie, but you know what would make it even better? If we ended it about 3 minutes early on a jump scare shot, rather than having the logical ending that exists in the film.
Mm-hmm.
So the American version of this ends very suddenly without resolving the movie story, rather than...
Well...
It resolves it in the worst possible way.
There is an epilogue to the film, which is a bit of a downer.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of American horror films, especially dating back throughout the 80s in particular, they seem to really like ending on a jump scare. Oh look, it's another scary thing. Boo! Roll credits.
Right. A good example of this is the horrible theatrical cut of just the last moment of Night of the Creeps.
Yeah, that's one of the one I'm thinking of.
About, which now only exists as the proper ending.
Oh, that's good, because the proper ending is a nice moody piece.
The DVD only has the correct ending.
Mm-hmm.
With this great scale model of a cemetery and amazing camera shots.
Yeah, no, we both love that film.
Yeah.
But yeah, The Descent similarly has a moody little epilogue that makes you just go, oh...
No, it's what made me like the movie more.
Yeah, it really fits in with the downer tone of the film.
The American ending ends on a bit that makes no sense compared to the film you've just watched. It does not properly close out this story and just makes you go, what producer added that moment? It doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you see the same moment in context with the epilogue, you say, oh, okay, fine. That's perfectly fine. That makes sense. And
the different ending, it's not a matter of reshoot, it's just a matter of trimming. Yeah. Like, basically about a minute of footage.
But at any rate, yeah, I had already seen the European cut at that point, so I was astonished when I saw what.
Well, luckily, I saw it in a theater here, and luckily they showed the proper ending to Canadian audiences.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So when I went to see this film, I went with a friend and his sister, and after the film, we got out, and we're instantly stuck in traffic. So in order to make conversation, they asked me, so Shane, what did you think of the film? And I considered it very carefully, and I said, I think it's the most vaginal film I've ever seen. To which
you mean after Ridley Scott's Alien?
Yeah. Well, to which they replied, "Oh, one-track mind." It's like, no. Think about it. Everything in the film is about vaginas and vaginal. It's all symbolism, and I try to explain how it's women crawling through these narrow spaces, and there is imagery about birth canals and the birthing process, and a lot of the film is about the loss of a child. Yeah. The monsters are these fetal-like creatures. There's a lot of womb elements to the film. Anyway, I ended up getting really annoyed by the conversation because they weren't seeing it. So about 6 months later, it comes out on DVD, and I show the film to my wife. And I get to the end, and I tell her that exchange I had, and I said, it's the most vaginal film I ever seen. And she didn't get it either. And I was like, oh, God, okay, fine. She liked the film, though, so she said, okay, well, let's watch the making of on the DVD. So we watched the making of the DVD, and it's nothing but the cast and crew talking about how everything in the film is a vagina.
That's very funny.
And it's like, so I was vindicated, and it was at that moment I knew my marriage was over.
Wow, and you only had 14 years.
Another 14 years.
To watch it grind down until the point where you both agreed that it was over and out.
Yeah, that we just had that moment. It's like, oh yeah, right, The Descent.
We were discussing yesterday a different movie. Oh, it was Suicide Squad was the real moment.
Yeah, that was another divisive moment between us.
The moment of realizing that the movie you were seeing was not the trailer you had seen in any way, shape, or form, and the bait and switch aspect of it.
Yeah, I got to the end of that and told her, I am so sorry I dragged you to this colossal piece of crap. To which she said, well, I thought it was okay.
Yeah. I guess if my brain was 90% turned off watching the film and I only kind of tuned in for the Harley Quinn moments and a few other flashy bits, I wouldn't have been angry at that film. But pacing-wise, that movie is an abysmal mess. Suicide Squad we're talking about.
Yeah.
All right, that's enough about Suicide Squad. Enough about The Descent, which we.
But we will get to bad editing again soon.
We will both wholeheartedly thumbs up The Descent.
Yeah, massive thumbs up.
I will say that there is an alternate universe, in no way connected in any way that makes sense, sequel to The Descent.
Yes, we should note that Neil Marshall had nothing to do with.
No, that's not true. He's a producer.
Well, okay, fine,
but he is involved peripherally in some of the things they shot for the movie because there's some flashback scenes where the previous cast appears on videotapes, things that they're watching segments of, and they were shot either by him or with him connected to it.
Was this deleted material from the first film? No,
this is literally new shots that he said, oh, I wouldn't mind filling out the backstory of these characters, but by the time the real movie was written and directed and finished, he just washed his hands of it. It's horrendous. It is about as bad a continuation of a story as you can do to something that works. You never, ever go back to the well and say, hey, remember all these plot lines we ended? Well, let's just see what would have happened if they had somehow magically kept going.
It is very much the Exorcist 2 of Descent movies.
Yeah, it may well be the Paul Schrader Exorcist movie, actually, comparatively. What were those called? There was two Exorcist. What are those Exorcist movies?
Well, there's an Exorcist 3.
No, I'm talking about those. Am I doing the wrong franchise? Aren't there?
The branching, the two versions, of the same sequel.
Wasn't that Exorcist?
Yeah, and it was Exorcist 3, and there was No,
I'm talking about
or is it
the 20-year later.
Oh, that
Schrader,
one. Oh, okay.
Ray Harlan movies.
Oh, yes. Okay.
But again, am I in the right franchise?
Yes, I believe you are. Yeah.
Where one director was hired to make a movie. No one really liked how it came out.
The idea that anyone wanted to continue after Exorcist 2: The Heretic is baffling.
Yeah, I know. But Legion's interesting. Is that what it's called, the third one?
Yeah, the third one was okay.
Which initially was not an Exorcist movie.
Right.
It was written and directed to be a totally different film, and then the studio was like, "You're the guy who did Exorcist. Let's just slap some Exorcist ideas into this," which apparently are all reshoots, the little exorcism moments, and it doesn't totally not work, but it is a messy film. At any rate, The Descent 2 it's not a glorious mess. It is just another word, massive, horrible choice mess. It has resurrections of characters in it. You're like, oh, remember this character from the first movie who was very clearly murdered? Oh no, they survived that. They're back. We wanted that actor or actress to be in the scene, so therefore they've magically survived that scene.
Yeah, I saw The Descent 2 just for academic purposes because, I'm also a big fan of the first one. Mm-hmm. I knew there's with a Neil Marshall, you're not going to make an adequate sequel to this. So I did watch it. It has all promptly fallen out of my head. I don't really remember any of it.
I have a hard time letting go of the magic resurrection moments with some of the characters. I have a feeling that the sequel to The Descent probably had double the budget of the original because it does have far more elaborate caves that they built. And I did read about that recently. I don't know, I didn't double check the math on them, but there is a good chance that they just threw money at the sequel thinking it would be a huge hit.
Yeah, they go into some detail in the making of The Descent to show, well, here's these small segments of tunnel that we created that we had to relight and flip over and use in different ways over and over and over again to make it look like multiple tunnels.
My favorite example of that, of reusing a set, is the movie Cube.
Yes.
Where they built literally one set and it looks like 1,000 sets.
Because
they
just changed the light gels.
Just kept changing the lighting. And the characters crawl from room to room, and every new room they crawl to is the old room again. And it's kind of genius. But that movie is pretty good.
Yeah.
Cube by Vincenzo Natali from, I want to say, 98.
Yeah, we'll have to do another show about him sometime.
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually. I don't think we've ever done a full Vincenzo Natali
show,
have we?
No, we have not.
He's certainly worth touching on, as everything he's done is interesting.
Yep.
Pretty much without exception. Oh, didn't he make some ghost movie about 5 years ago?
The Haunter.
Yeah, that's terrible. The rest of it, please don't defend that awful movie.
I will say it's on career theme.
Yeah, but it's no good. But I would very much argue that the 25-minute TV pilot he did for, I can't remember the name of it, but it was a short anthology show.
Yeah, you showed me that. Yeah.
Vastly superior to his 2-hour Haunter movie, just in how much he gets accomplished in that very short episode. But anyway, we've segued to the
we could allow ourselves to go off on tangents because Neil Marshall's career is not lengthy as far as titles go.
Very true. You are listening to CJLO 1690. This show is called Cinema Smackdown. We're talking about Neil Marshall today and his not super long career. He's only directed 8 movies, so there's not a lot to talk about.
Yeah, well.
And, I don't know if I should mention it now or wait to the end. I might forget later, but he has an upcoming project listed. Now, I don't know if this is real or not, but listed in future projects is a King Kong movie. It's called, let me see if I can find a title. It's called Skull Island: Blood of the Kong. And it is both a sequel to King Kong and a prequel. Because it's about someone after King Kong has died going back to the island to find out his origins.
Now, is this going to be related to the recent Skull Island movie?
I guess so, because
it
is in fact called Skull Island.
Yeah, I mean, you can't call too many movies Skull Island in the title.
So the idea being, Kong Skull Island would have been the first movie, then King Kong would have been a later film, and then we go back for Skull Island 2, essentially. So this movie is about Carl Denham's son going back to the island. Kong's already dead at this point, but he's got to learn the origins. And so the entire movie, from what I gather from the brief synopsis, It's a flashback movie with pirates. It's Pirates versus Kong.
Oh, yeah, I heard something about a Pirate Kong movie. It's viable, I guess. I mean,
all right.
I'm a little surprised they haven't made more Kong films because and you gotta resolve that continuity of he climbs the Empire State Building, he dies, he gets resurrected, he climbs the World Trade Center, he dies, he gets resurrected.
Yeah. Suddenly it's the 1970s, and he's still around.
It's the 70s, and then he gets a heart transplant and wakes up for Kong Lives.
No, have you still not seen Skull Island?
No, I still haven't.
Oh
no.
my goodness.
Yeah.
I will say, love or hate that movie, the first 4 minutes of Kong Skull Island are among the most perfect of how any movie could possibly open. I mean, given the content of this movie, of course. But just the way that they walk you into this story made me so happy, visually speaking. The way it tells a certain amount of story in about 4 minutes. The visuals were genius. It made me so excited to watch the rest of the movie, which is fair.
Well, if Neil Marshall gets tapped to do another one in this franchise, could be good. But then again, Hellboy. But we'll get to Hellboy.
So we've talked out The Descent because it is a pretty great movie.
I feel like we should talk about the next two films as a combined effort because they share the same theme. So there's Doomsday, which is this post-plague, post-apocalypse mishmash of 1980s genre films, including
future movie plus Knights of the Round Table.
Yeah, plus tribute to Excalibur. Yeah.
Plus something else.
Yeah, well, kind of like zombie plague-ish type of elements.
Yeah. And the whole thing stars a female Snake Plissken.
Yeah.
That's very important to bits of the story. She's very much Snake Plissken, same eye patch, same attitude. Played by Rona Mitra, who I like this bit of trivia about her. Before she made it as an actress, Rona Mitra was a model, and she literally was the physical model for Lara Croft.
Oh, okay.
So when you see Rona Mitra and stuff, there's a strange sort of familiarity. It's just something about her. It's her body that they used to design Lara Croft. And of course, by the time they got around to making Tomb Raider movies, they had Angelina Jolie, who was a megastar, and by the time they got around to doing the reboot, well, Rona Mitra was probably way too old, so there was no way they were going to go back to her for that. So it's kind of a shame. I would have liked to have seen her play the character. She has a certain physical presence I like.
Mm-hmm.
Although, I think like a lot of actresses, she is tiny. She's one of those people that when they shoot, they really have to angle the camera a certain way to make you realize she's taller than 5'2". I have no idea how tall she is, but I think she's tiny.
Mm-hmm.
At any rate, she's great in that movie, though. She's great in Doomsday, I'm saying.
About in this post-plague scenario where Scotland's been walled off as this impassable plague zone, years later they have to go over the wall and go in to try and snatch out a cure for the disease, is the plan anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And in it they find a lot of 1980s genre tropes.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
The counterpoint to this is his film after that, which is Centurion, which is a Roman-era, Roman occupation of the British Isles film, involving a group having to go north of Hadrian's Wall into what was then Caledonia, and facing off against the Picts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's two films, both with Scotland being walled off, because anything north of the wall is insane, barbarous, nightmarish horror.
Very true.
Scotland.
I actually revisited Centurion last night because I remembered zero about that movie, and I just went and checked. I didn't watch every minute of the film, but I went through it a little bit, watched a few key scenes. And as I like to say about most of Neil Marshall's movies, it's a huge mess. It is a mess. It's an interesting mess in places, but my recollection about Doomsday's special effects is a little vague. I like Doomsday a lot. I had fun watching that movie. I was completely on board when it genre shifted without my realizing it was about to.
Uh-huh.
When you're in one movie and you realize this character has just entered a completely different...
Oh, and now we're doing Mad Max, and now we're doing Excalibur.
Exactly. Yeah, well, that's true. It's kind of a zombie movie becomes a Mad Max movie becomes an Excalibur film.
Mm-hmm.
And those are pretty big tonal shifts. And I was super on board for those. But
it was sort of like a resume of, this is stuff from the 80s I like.
Exactly.
By Neil Marshall.
Mm-hmm. At any rate, I don't recall the special effects level in Doomsday. But I watched Centurion last night. And here's the thing about Centurion that is insane. Everybody who worked on Centurion said, we do not want to do any green screening in this movie, so we're going to go to real, difficult locations so everything looks authentic. And the movie looks amazing until you get to any scenes of violence, of which there's 500 scenes of violence in this movie, and all the violence is CGI. All of it. It is atrociously poor violence. And somewhere along the line, they made this decision to do only so many practical effects on set. And you realize, then they get, with their raw footage, they go in and realize, oh, all of this is going to look like garbage. What a shame that we tortured our actors under these unbelievable conditions. There's a lot of information about this movie. People who got frostbite, people who had dehydration, all of this stuff. And then, well, then we do a sword hit, and it's a cartoon! And you think, wow, what an unbelievable missed opportunity to make this movie look good.
And that was the moment Michael Fassbender said, I will spend the rest of my career in front of a green screen.
Yeah. Boy, I hate that guy. Damn him and his 8-foot-long penis. He's not my Magneto. Hashtag not my Magneto. I cannot believe... I mean, I'd fully understood Michael Fassbender playing Magneto in a movie. Perhaps 2 or 3 if you were contractually obligated.
Hey, they're all prequels now.
And now it's 8 films in and he's still playing the same version of that angry character. They hurt my family. I'll never stop making everyone pay.
I will play young Magneto up until about a week before I'm supposed to transform into old Magneto.
The amazing thing is, I think 6 movies into his X-Men, and I'm just guessing at numbers here, but I think about 6 movies into his X-Men performance of playing Magneto, he's finally gotten over the traumas that led him to being this angry, and he has a whole new family who 2 minutes after you discover he has a whole new family are immediately executed so that the anger comes right back. New family dead, back on the revenge path. Michael Fassbender. Anyway, yeah, he and Dominic West.
But on the bright side, he never has to shoot in Scotland again. In the wilds of Scotland.
He and Dominic West are the 2 guys in Centurion, among a slightly larger cast. And it's got moments, and it's got great ideas for violence, and it's engaging, and yet I don't care. I try.
Yeah, it's probably the film, though, that most got him his gig doing those 2 episodes of Game of Thrones that he directed. Because
they predate Game of Thrones completely. It's a 2010 movie, so it predates Game of Thrones. Centurion, I guess we should quickly just give the premise of it. A splinter group of Roman soldiers fight for their lives behind enemy lines after their legion is devastated in a guerrilla attack. This movie
because the Scots were crazy even before they were Scottish.
This entire movie is somebody saying, hey, there's a story in history that's a footnote about a legion that went missing. That's fine. You can do a movie based on that. But the entire epilogue of this film is an incredibly stupid explanation for why, even though they were missing, fought their way back and made it, we're still going to explain why they were never written about after that. And it's terrible. It just feels like somebody saying, you know, the historians are going to kill us if we don't do an extra scene where we fully explain how they were removed from history. It is awful. It is awful, terrible writing, and features a scene of Fassbender slapping the Queen across the face, which is really quite something. I actually don't know what her title was, but she's the ruling female part of the royalty at that point. Whatever the Empress might be, I suppose.
Okay, it's been a while since I've seen it, so I don't remember this bit. But
yeah, they just decided to kill him at the end rather than besmirch the memory of his legion. And
now, considering it's Hadrian's Wall, if it were slapping Hadrian's wife, she had it coming. But
like no one from that era had it coming.
Yeah, well, this was actually okay. Well, I won't get into Roman history because I'm going to geek out then.
It's a different podcast. I did a little Hadrian's Wall research last night based on an upcoming trivia question I'll be doing at one of my many, many trivia nights. In the next few weeks, I will be doing a Game of Thrones trivia night at my 2 locations where I do trivia. One is Grumpy's, downtown Montreal, and one is Four Origins on the south side of the canal in Montreal. Both excellent locations. Both will, in the very near future, feature a Game of Thrones themed night. And if you know the words Hadrian's Wall, you have a leg up on winning a point in one round. At any rate...
So show up and win beer.
That's right. So after Centurion, Neil Marshall kind of vanished. He didn't make a movie for a decade. He went into television, and he shot lots and lots of TV. He shot episodes of Black Sails, 2 very memorable Game of Thrones episodes.
Yeah, they tapped him for giant battle stuff.
Yeah.
Because he's full of good action bits.
And 2 things I find are of note. One was that he didn't create, but he directed the pilot and first following episode of the Constantine show, which is the John Constantine from the Swamp Thing comics who went on to become Hellblazer as a series. He's a great character, and that show is abysmal on a level that requires training to make something as bad as that. I really didn't care for his Constantine
But
show.
how does it compare to the Keanu version?
The Keanu version... Here's the thing about that Keanu Reeves movie that's crazy. I think the movie's around 2003. So, I don't know how well you remember the movie.
Yeah, I saw it again not that long ago.
So, the Keanu Reeves movie is a paranormal investigator movie. And it opens, and he's doing an exorcism, and you see the worst CGI you're ever going to see, and you immediately tune out. And when they start introducing characters, they're awful, and the movie just gets worse, and it's not enjoyable. And then... the last 25 minutes of the movie, he's sitting on the floor in a bathroom, and he needs to resolve his plot points. And the movie calms down completely. And it's at that moment that Lucifer shows up, I think it is. Is he Lucifer? Is he the devil?
Is it Lucifer,
anyway,
or is it one of the others?
A high-ranking demon shows up to talk to Constantine.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I keep mispronouncing his name because the movies and TV show Americanized his name. The character's name is Constantine, as very clearly stated many, many times throughout the character's history. The pronunciation is clear. In America, people don't understand how to pronounce things, so they massively mispronounce that as Constantine, which was rough for me. And it was super bad when he was an American character in that film, and then when they made him a British character again, they stuck with calling him Constantine, which was just painful. Hearing a British guy say his name wrong was rough. At any rate, the last act of the Constantine movie with Reeves, suddenly, you've been watching the worst film you've seen all year, and suddenly you're watching a pretty good movie. And that last chunk is great. Everything from that exchange, all the way to the end credits, is a kind of a great movie. And I own a DVD of it because I liked that last act so much.
Well, yeah, I own a DVD of it as well because I like Tilda Swinton as Gabriel.
She's great.
Yeah, she is fantastic in this as the very androgynous... angel with a hidden agenda.
Yeah. All right, speaking of hidden agendas, here comes a couple of more ads for us to enjoy, and we'll be back with a little bit more of Neil Marshall's filmography after this. Actually, wasn't a bad segue. As my occasionally terrible segues go, that one was clean. Oh, lucky there. I definitely will stand by my Constantine review, though. I hate that movie until that scene where he's sitting on the floor dying, and I'm like, it gets so... The photography changes, the pacing changes. You're like, what movie is this all of a sudden?
It's not a terrible effort.
It's the guy who directed I Am Legend. It's pretty bad. That guy, Francois or Francis something? Did he? No, he's not the guy who did The Crow. He's the guy who did those.
Tune in to Ashes to Ashes.
Just 20 seconds.
Whether it be synth pop, electro pop, ambient pop, or anything else ending in pop. Tuesday from 1 to 2 p.m. on CGL 1690 AM
Laughing at
and
the
CGL.
synth pop, ambient pop, 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 pop.
Pop, pop!
Pop, pop.
Pop, pop.
Jesus, I forgot about them. Way to force a catchphrase. And we're back on CGL 1690. Our show is called Cinema Smackdown. We've been counting down the hits for Neil Marshall. Actually, we're doing pretty good at stretching out his filmography. We've talked about it for 45 minutes.
Because we have to get to the main event.
I just thought we'd be way out of films by now, but we're doing his TV shows. So we mentioned his Constantine show briefly, that he worked on this. He was the first director on the project. And here's the thing. I loathed that show. I didn't like the tone. I didn't like the pace. The writing was abysmal. However, the casting. He cast someone perfect. So I watched every episode of that show. Only because the actor was bang on exactly right for Constantine. Mm-hmm. And that kept me going. Even though I couldn't stand it. And they have, I guess DC agreed that he was good casting because they have continued his character once that show was canceled. They brought him over to what is now known as the Arrowverse. He's been on the Green Arrow show, and now he's a regular character on this Legends of Tomorrow show. Where he's terrible, but at least they kept the actor working. So he was good in his one Green Arrow appearance. That was a great little mystical moment in one show where he pops up and does something and takes off. That was a great cameo. At any rate, the actor who plays Constantine is wonderful. He is, in the best way possible, no Keanu Reeves. One more TV show that Neil Marshall did that I wanted to touch on was Neil Marshall directed just one episode, but he directed an episode of the Hannibal TV show. And the Hannibal TV show was on for 3 seasons. 2 of those seasons, the first 2, are masterpieces. If you're still on the fence about trying to watch Hannibal, just go watch Hannibal. It's a great show. Season 3 isn't bad, but it's not the magic that the first 2 are. They try to cram pretty much 2 entire books of content into Season 3, which I wasn't crazy about. Mm-hmm. It's a little rushed. They do all of Red Dragon and other things. And the problem with the 3rd season is that they so carefully stick with the novel of Red Dragon in places that it doesn't feel right, given the show you're watching. But at any rate, I don't really want to slag the show. It is a great series, and the 2 leads who play Will Graham and Hannibal Lecter, those guys are mesmerizing in every scene. So
yeah, I watched half of the first season, and I have to say, I had a real problem with Mads Mikkelsen's accent.
Well, that's
what
subtitles are for.
Yeah, I at times did want to turn on the subtitles.
I will say the very, very, very first episode, there are 5 lines he says I could not tell what he was saying. But beyond the first episode, I actually found that they cleared him up pretty well. At any rate,
I understood the cast of dogs in Will Graham's house better.
Well, they had very clear desires that were very, very, very succinctly put forward by those dogs.
So during Neil Marshall's long hiatus from film work, we should mention that he did have other projects that sort of died on the vine, may yet resurface, but
one in particular.
Yeah, well, 2. Well, yeah, there's 2 for me too. There's one. There's Pendragon, which was his King Arthur story that he wanted. The King Arthur heist story.
Yet another movie where it's just I just want to make Excalibur already.
Yeah, he really.
When will you let me remake Excalibur?
His love for Excalibur keeps shining on through.
So.
It sounded intriguing, but I was much more interested in one called Voyage of the Demeter. Mm-hmm. So this
a catchy title, if ever.
No, yeah, it's not a great title, but it refers to something specific from literature. The Demeter is the ship that bore Dracula to England in the original novel Dracula by Bram Stoker.
Which arrives as a ghost ship.
Yeah, because everyone's been murdered on board, or
to the wheel.
Yeah, there's the captain is tied to the wheel. Everyone else is pretty much missing, and it's just a little chapter, a little episode in the book. But Neil Marshall, I don't think it was his original script.
I have no idea.
But he certainly latched onto the idea that, there's more story to be told there. When I heard him talk about it, what I was most interested about was, despite this being an episode from Dracula blown out to a feature-length film, there was no mention of Dracula in the film. He was just referred to as the Nosferatu, which is weird because the fact is Dracula isn't that kind of your selling point?
I don't know. I actually really like the idea that it would be one of those movies where they don't overtly say it. Now, let's not be studio executives in this moment. It's a better film if they don't do it.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. But, from a marketing point of view, I don't know.
But look, we're about to get into Hellboy and marketing. So, marketing it's always terrible. It's a terrible idea to look at any film from the point of view of marketing. I mean, from the point of view of marketing, the movie will no longer be called Voyage of the Demeter. It'll be called Grave of the Vampire. That's what it'll be called.
Dracula boat.
Yeah.
I want to go see Dracula boat.
I'm all in on Dracula boat, especially. Actually, I don't. It kind of sells itself. Dracula boat. There should be an exclamation point. We could get Cuba Gooding Jr. to reprise his role in, what was that called?
Oh, God.
Sex Boat?
Whatever
boat?
It was, yeah.
It's got a boat in the title. It's a truly
not
terrible
Love Boat.
Throwback title.
Boat Ahoy. I don't know.
Boat Trip. Might be Boat Trip.
Might be Boat Trip, yeah.
I refuse to look it up. I want to live in ignorance.
So does Cuba Gooding Jr.
I know. Poor guy. So, back to Neil Marshall. Yeah, I want to see that movie. I want to see his Excalibur film called Pendragon, which, yeah, as you said, it's a heist movie. People stealing... Is it stealing Excalibur?
Yeah, it's basically stealing Excalibur so the wrong people can't get it. Because the idea being that only Arthur could pull it out of the pull it out of the stone. But once it was out of the stone, any arsehole who got his hand on it would become King of England.
Yeah. I remember an adaptation of that story from way back when. It was probably something from the BBC that I saw on PBS as a child. I have no memory of it other than this moment, which was anyone holding that sword, in this story at any rate, was untouchable. You hit them with a sword, they don't get cut. Is that in any other version of these stories?
Which version are you talking about?
Like I said, some BBC version I saw when I was a child.
Well, I mean, the thing is, the King Arthur thing, there's a million different versions of the story.
This is just
pick one.
If you're holding the sword, you're invulnerable. And in the story that I saw, Arthur lost the sword and another guy had it in his hand, and he was playing sword fighting with Arthur, and he kept stabbing Arthur lightly to try to drag this out, because he was holding Excalibur and couldn't be wounded, and Arthur had to figure out a way to trick him into dropping it.
Now, was this an episodic show?
Yes.
Okay, it sounds like something that was just pulled out of some writer's ass.
I liked it, though. I liked it at the time, that the concept of, as you're holding this, you can't be hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of interesting. Because, of course, it gets out of your hand, you're in trouble. That was the idea. At any rate, let's segue from his love of King Arthur tales to his love of sticking it in a Hellboy movie. And when I say sticking it in a Hellboy movie, I mean it on multiple levels. So
no, fair enough, though. He didn't write this.
I know, but...
And yet it still has King Arthur stuff in it.
Yeah, it opens
and
with
Excalibur.
Possibly the worst King Arthur scene I've ever seen. In fact, it includes a character saying, "No mortal weapon can harm me," and then has a moment and yells at the top of her lungs, "Excalibur!" Like a Farrelly Brothers movie moment. Realizing, oh crap,
which should have been
weapon.
Which should have been accompanied by a "Don't Excalibur."
Yes, so the weapon Excalibur plays kind of an important role in the new Hellboy movie, directed by Neil Marshall but not written by him. The first movie he's ever worked on that he didn't write, by the way. And so, just for fun this morning, I watched the trailer for Hellboy, having already seen the movie. And I will say this, the trailer's great.
Yeah.
It's full of good moments. And here's the thing that the trailer does that the movie doesn't do. The trailer hints at the idea that this movie has pacing. And that's the key thing that's wrong with the new Hellboy movie. It has no pacing, which is to say, every time a character delivers what might be considered an important line of dialogue, the shot will instantly cut to whatever the next plot point is. You do not have a split second to live in any moments in this film. So it doesn't breathe, which is the biggest crime a movie can possibly have. I mean, there is also the crime of just staying in a moment way too long in any film. But this movie will never be accused of that, as the breakneck pace of how they're trying to depict moment to moment in this, it's just unforgivably bad.
Well, part of the problem in that trying to do a more faithful adaptation of the Hellboy comic, they took 4 or 5 or even 6 different plot lines from different comic runs of Hellboy and just mashed them all together and said, yeah, this is kind of linked, sort of, I guess. Yeah. But let's just cut to the next one so quickly people won't notice.
Yeah, the Wild Hunt is taken care of in about 7 minutes.
Right.
There's a plot is jammed into
Hellboy in Mexico plot line.
That's true. I would have liked to have seen 40 minutes of that. I would have liked to have seen a 40-minute version of the
the Blood Witch or whatever. That's another one.
It's too much material all crammed together. The movie's around 2 hours, and it feels like they had 3 hours of content that they... And at some point, someone said, well, we shot this. We can't possibly cut the scene, so just trim it down to nothing so we can see all the stuff we paid for. So lines of dialogue fall flat because they're just cut into. There's no time for anybody to ever react to anything. It's just on to the next, breakneck pace. There are movies that do this expertly. This is not one of them. This feels like a producer took it. It feels like a producer took it out of his hands and made his own cut.
Yeah, there are certain Hellboy characters who are dropped in that, I don't know, it feels like we're expected to react to them, but it's like, oh, look, it's the Lobster. Remember him from the comics? Most people go, no.
Yeah.
But here he is, and you're supposed to care.
His appearance is a little bit, wink, wink, you know this guy.
It's like,
if
no.
you don't, then this scene doesn't work.
No, and he's wearing a mask, so I didn't even recognize the actor until the end credits.
I recognized the actor the moment he spoke. He has one of those faces.
Okay.
So
Thomas Hayden Church, if you're
wondering. Shame on you.
Okay, well, sorry, I can't claim to be the world's
your...
biggest Thomas Hayden Church fan.
Shame on you, and with your deep, deep love of your wine movie.
Well, yeah, just because it stars my doppelganger.
Your doppelganger, Thomas Hayden Church.
If only.
We're just about out of time. I guess the only thing to say is the new Hellboy movie is atrocious, and it makes the other two Hellboy movies seem like masterpieces, which they most certainly are not. But they're likable. They were getting better.
They're all kind of messy films.
The first one's messy, but the second one's kind of good, and it was really promising that a third one would be great.
And then somewhere in development hell, it turned in from being a sequel to the other two to being a semi sort of reboot prequel that doesn't fit into the continuity.
Yeah, unfortunately. And the reality is, I liked what you said. Your review of this was, well, this is certainly the RoboCop 3 of Hellboy movies.
Yeah.
To which I would counter, this is the Descent 2 of Hellboy movies. I feel like that's the perfect...
I would elevate a little above. I was more entertained by this than I was by Descent 2.
And don't get me wrong, here's the crazy thing about the Hellboy movie. There's a good movie in there. There is absolutely good movie.
If you swept up all the scrapings that are on the editing room floor, you could probably cut together a better version of this. Easy.
I'd say a good movie. Mm-hmm. Because the opening in Mexico is interesting. The Wild Hunt is interesting. The ogres are interesting. The giant trolls or ogres, whatever they are.
Just referred to as giants, but yeah.
They're interesting. Hellboy's relationship with people is interesting. You just barely get to see any of it. It's all just on to the next, on to the next.
Yeah, it skips through stuff very quickly. There's no sense of a journey going on here.
Well, we are entirely out of time now. So I will just say I am Michael Brody. I have been joined by Shane Simmons. This has been Cinema Smackdown. And we're going to throw it to the Auto DJ and to the wonderful new segment that we all enjoy so much. Here we go.
You're listening to CJLO 1690 AM.
I guess no follow-up show.
Nobody what?
No follow-up show.
Yeah, apparently.
That was alright. It was one of those things where we get 15 minutes in and I'm like, how are we going to fill this? Oh, we're done. We didn't get to all of it either. There's more we could have said about stuff.
Yeah, it's true. Well,
we touched on things, so that was good. And we made a lot of bad jokes in the meantime. So that
was
good too.
Yeah, I know. I got through it despite no sleep last night.
Oh, 0?
Well, not really.
Wow.
And, I went to bed late, and it's like, and then there was that box collapse I was talking about at 8 in the morning.
Yeah, I didn't know. So
and I had to leap out of bed to make sure that none of my cats were flattened by it.
Yeah.
So
3 hours, something like that?
Maybe. I got up, I lied around, I read more of the Craig Zoller book, and then finally got up.
In a half-awake state, you mean?
Yeah, well, kind of in a... my vision's a little bit blurry, but I'm going to read 4 or 5 chapters of this anyway.
I found that book, it's very rare at my age that anything is compelling me to go back and read. And that book, it was every day. It's like, I'm going to read another 20 pages of this, and then stop. Mm-hmm. Because I love it so much.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it was every single day. I was actually going out to coffee shops as an event to read the book. So I would know I was in it. And yeah, I really love that book, so...
Yeah, it is. There's something horrible and dark in every chapter, and the chapters are short.